Wealthy lady throws mud at black woman. Seconds later, a black billionaire steps out and stuns everyone. The splash hit her like a slap. A thick splatter of wet, brown mud landed across Kennedy Rhodes's blazer, staining the ivory fabric in an instant. Gasps rose around the upscale sidewalk cafe in Charleston, South Carolina. Everything froze for a moment. Forks hovered mid-air, conversations silenced mid-sentence, and eyes darted toward the source. A tall white woman stood 5 feet away, still holding the nearly empty coffee cup she'd used to scoop the mud from the planter box. She wore a cashmere cardigan draped over her shoulders like royalty, and had a smirk curling on her lips. "I guess you people don't understand how to dress for brunch," the woman sneered. Kennedy took a slow breath. Her hand instinctively moved to her chest, not from fear, but to still the anger rising like fire in her lungs. She looked down at her now ruined blazer, then back up at the woman. "You people?" Kennedy echoed, her voice calm, too calm. The kind of calm that made the people around her shift in their seats. A waiter awkwardly approached, his hands fluttering uselessly at his sides. Ma'am, maybe we should move this inside." "No," Kennedy said, still locking eyes with the woman. "We're just getting started." Just then, a low, deep voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, Charlotte, did you just throw mud at my guest?" Heads turned toward the street where a sleek black SUV had pulled up. From the back stepped a man in a tailored grey suit, shoes polished enough to mirror the sky, posture so commanding that even the hostess dropped her tablet. His skin was a rich onyx tone, his eyes sharp, and his voice carried the weight of boardrooms, back channels, and billion-dollar decisions. Charlotte's face blanched. "Ashton! I didn't know she was with you." Ashton DeWitt. The name alone made CEOs flinch. One of Forbes' most reclusive black billionaires, he was known as much for his philanthropic empire as for his fierce silence in the media. Most people only saw him in business headlines. No one expected him to be here in person. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask," Ashton said, walking calmly toward Kennedy. He handed her a silk handkerchief. "You okay?" Kennedy took the cloth slowly, but her eyes never left Charlotte. "I was, until someone decided I didn't belong." "I'm calling security," Charlotte snapped, trying to regain control. "This is my family's property." "Actually," Ashton interrupted, pulling a folded document from his jacket, "as of yesterday, I own a majority stake in this property group, which includes this cafe." "So technically you're throwing mud on my guest, on my property." The silence was deafening. Charlotte stammered. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious," Ashton replied. Then he turned to the manager who had just stepped outside. "Greg, I want her trespassed immediately." Kennedy watched as 2 uniformed security guards approached, one gently asking Charlotte to leave. Her hands flailed, her words stumbling in disbelief as she tried to argue. "You'll regret this, Ashton. Your father sold me controlling interest. He regrets things already," Ashton said. As the guards escorted Charlotte out, still shrieking, Kennedy finally let out a breath. She turned to Ashton, eyes narrowed. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," he answered. "Not just for you. For every black woman who gets treated like less, just because she walks into a place where people like Charlotte think they own the air." Kennedy looked down at her stained blazer. "This wasn't how I planned to spend the day." Ashton smiled, a rare soft curve. "I know, but sometimes the world hands us the mic. It's up to us to speak loud enough so no one forgets." She paused. "You always this dramatic?" He shrugged. "Only when someone touches my friends." That word, friends, caught her off guard. Kennedy had only met Ashton twice before, once at a foundation dinner and another briefly at a panel in D.C. She hadn't even known he was in Charleston this week. "You tracked me down just for brunch?" she asked, trying to sound skeptical, but her voice held the smallest crack of warmth. "I tracked you down," he said, "because I've been watching the way you walk into every room like you belong there, even when they try to shove you back out." Kennedy's face softened, but before she could answer, a woman stepped forward from the crowd. A cafe guest in her mid-40s, dressed modestly in faded jeans and a worn floral top. She had been sitting unnoticed at a back table the entire time. "I saw everything," she said, holding up her phone. "And I recorded it." Ashton looked at her with interest. "You did?" "Yes," she nodded. "People need to see this. They need to see what black women go through, and how it gets shut down when the right person shows up." Kennedy hesitated. "It's not about me." "No," the woman said, "but it could be about all of us." And in that moment, Kennedy knew the story wouldn't end here. She wasn't just a target that day. She had become a symbol, and whether she liked it or not, the world was about to find out who Kennedy Rhodes really was, and why Charlotte Langford had picked the wrong woman to throw mud at. The video went viral overnight. By the time Kennedy woke up the next morning in her modest townhouse on the edge of Charleston's historic district, her phone was buzzing non-stop. Messages flooded in, texts from old college friends, voicemails from unknown numbers, emails with subject lines like, "Urgent media request," and "Can we talk about what happened yesterday?" At first, she didn't even realize what was happening. Then she saw it. The footage. From the outside, it looked like a scene written for television. A powerful white socialite, hurling mud at a calm, dignified black woman, only to be stopped cold by a billionaire who just happened to own the property. The comments were on fire. "This is what Grace looks like." She didn't even flinch. "She's a queen, and that man is what allyship should look like." Kennedy stared at the screen, a strange numbness spreading in her chest. This wasn't the kind of attention she wanted. She wasn't trying to become a symbol. She hadn't even told most people what she actually did for a living. As if summoned by the thought, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Rhodes? This is Jordan Wells from CNN. We'd love to have you on the show this evening." She hung up. A few minutes later, another call came through. This one from a familiar name. Ashton. She let it ring twice before answering. "You set me up," she said without even a hello. There was a pause. "I assume you've seen the video. You think?" "Listen," he said calmly. "I didn't post it. Someone else at the cafe did. And you should know. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, even Facebook somehow." Kennedy closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. "This wasn't supposed to be about me." "It already is," Ashton said. "And like it or not, you handled it with the kind of poise that people needed to see." She exhaled slowly. "This is going to mess up everything." "Only if you let it," he said. "Or you could own it." Before she could answer, a loud knock came at the door. She peeked through the peephole. Two well-dressed strangers, one holding a press badge, the other a camera. Kennedy didn't open the door. Instead, she backed away and sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. Because the truth was, she wasn't just a random woman in the crowd. She wasn't just a symbol of calm dignity. She was working undercover. 3 months earlier, Kennedy Rhodes had taken a leave from her high-profile position as a Department of Justice special investigator. Officially, it was a sabbatical. Unofficially, she was building a case, one that involved corporate corruption, land grabs, and the very real threat to black communities in Charleston being pushed out by wealthy developers. Charlotte Langford's family was at the center of it all. Kennedy had been quietly investigating the Langfords' real estate holdings through a shell company posing as a freelance legal consultant. She had spent weeks gathering intel, attending local meetings, and gaining the trust of residents being pushed from their homes. Now all of that could be compromised. She called her contact, Elijah Pena, a former prosecutor now working off books with a watchdog group tied to the case. "Elijah, we have a problem." "I saw," he said, not even asking what she meant. "Your face is everywhere." "You can't go back to being invisible now." "I know. The cover's blown. So what do we do?" Kennedy stood, staring out the window at the reporters beginning to gather across the street. "We go public, but on our terms." That evening, Kennedy did what she hadn't planned to do. She sat down with a local black-owned media outlet, small, independent, and trusted, and told her side of the story. Not about being a victim, not about the mud, but about the system. She talked about redlining, about unjust evictions, about how certain developers used historical preservation laws as a weapon to displace black families. She never mentioned her role with the DOJ. But the fire had already started. The next day, protesters gathered outside a Langford-owned development site. Activists dug up tax records. One of Charlotte's uncles, who sat on the city zoning board, suddenly retired. And then came the twist. A leaked memo. Someone on the inside had anonymously emailed documents showing the Langfords had used political donations to sway votes on redevelopment projects. And the name attached to the consultancy hired to draft those proposals? Kennedy Rhodes. Only it wasn't her real signature. Someone had forged it to make it look like she was part of the corruption. It was a setup. They were trying to silence her. When she met Ashton the next evening on his rooftop balcony overlooking Charleston Harbor, the sun was dipping low, painting everything in gold. "I told you this would get messy," he said. "You didn't say they'd try to frame me." "I underestimated how fast they'd move." Kennedy turned to him. "You still want to help?" "I'm already in it," he replied. "Besides, they messed with the wrong woman." "And the wrong billionaire?" she teased. He gave a rare smile. "Exactly." She looked out at the horizon, heart pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. They weren't done. This wasn't just about a mud-slinging socialite anymore. It was war, and Kennedy Rhodes was no longer undercover. She was front and center. And this time, the world was watching. The courthouse smelled like tension and old paper. Kennedy walked through the heavy doors of the Charleston Municipal Building, her heels clicking with each deliberate step. Outside, protesters waved signs, some with her face on them, others with phrases like, "Justice for Gadsden," and "We're still here." She hated being a symbol, but she wasn't going to run from it anymore. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. Stares followed her. Some curious, some angry, others reverent. She knew this wasn't just a hearing. It was a test. A motion had been filed by the Langford legal team to discredit her public claims and pursue defamation charges. It was an audacious move, a smokescreen to stall investigations while the family tried to regain control of the narrative. But Kennedy wasn't alone. Ashton entered just moments after she did, dressed in a dark navy suit that didn't just scream wealth, it whispered power. His presence alone made the room buzz. "You sure you want to do this in public?" he murmured, stepping beside her. "I'm done hiding," Kennedy said, her voice steady. "Let them try." They sat at the front as the proceedings began. Charlotte Langford didn't show. Instead, her family's top attorney, Mitchell Reese, stood tall with an expensive air of smugness. He began. "Your Honor, what we have here is a matter of public manipulation. My clients have been portrayed in the media as predatory developers without evidence. Ms. Rhodes, who I'll remind the court is not a licensed attorney in South Carolina, has made accusations that have led to vandalism, death threats, and irreparable damage to my client's business. Kennedy's own lawyer, a fiery civil rights attorney named Jada Fields, stood up calmly. With all due respect, Mitchell, what your clients call damage, the rest of us call accountability, and we have plenty of evidence. Leaked memos, eviction timelines, political donations linked to zoning decisions. If you're so sure of your position, let's open discovery. That landed hard. Judge Holloway, an older black man with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for theatrics, raised an eyebrow. Mr. Reese, are your clients prepared for that level of transparency? Reese fumbled. Not at this time, Your Honor. We're simply requesting an emergency injunction to limit Ms. Rhodes's ability to continue spreading disinformation. So, you want her silenced? A tense silence. The judge turned to Kennedy. Ms. Rhodes, are you prepared to defend your claims under oath? Yes, Your Honor, she replied without hesitation. Then came the twist. The court doors opened mid-session, and a man in a rumpled grey suit rushed in. His name was Marvin Keller, an independent appraiser contracted by the city for years, until recently, when he'd mysteriously gone off-grid. He looked shaken. Your Honor, he called out, ignoring protocol. I need to be heard. The judge frowned. Sir, this is highly irregular. I have documents, Keller said. Real ones. Proof that the Langford family paid off multiple city inspectors to mark black-owned properties as condemned so they could snatch them up below market value. The room erupted. Mitchell Reese stood up, shouting about procedure. Jada smirked and calmly accepted the folder Keller handed her. I've been sitting with this guilt for 2 years, Keller continued. They promised me anonymity, but then they cut me off, tried to scare me, but I saw the footage last week. Of what happened to Ms. Rhodes, and I couldn't stay quiet. Judge Holloway called a recess. Outside in the corridor, Kennedy leaned against a wall, breath short. Keller had just cracked the case wide open, but it also meant the Langfords were more desperate than ever. Ashton stood beside her, arms crossed. This is going to get dangerous. I'm not backing down, she said. He nodded slowly. Neither am I. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was something unspoken between them. A bond forged not in romance, but in war. In resistance. That night, Kennedy returned to her townhouse to find her front window shattered. Someone had thrown a brick through the glass. Taped to it was a note scrawled in thick red ink. You've been warned. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up the brick, placed it on her kitchen table, and called Elijah. We need to go wider, she said. National. You want me to leak it to the Times? No. Bigger. She paused. I want a congressional inquiry. Elijah exhaled slowly on the other end. You're asking for hell to break loose. Kennedy's voice was ice. Then let's break it. The storm rolled in just before dawn. Kennedy stood by her kitchen window, the wind tugging at the edges of the plastic she'd used to seal the broken glass. Rain slid down in streaks, but it wasn't the weather that kept her up. It was what came next. Congressional inquiries weren't requests. They were declarations of war. Elijah had worked all night pulling strings in D.C. By 6 a.m., her inbox pinged with a draft letter from Representative Tanya Monroe, a fierce progressive from New Jersey who'd built her reputation on exposing corruption in real estate and policing. The letter demanded a full investigation into the Langford family's political connections and property acquisitions across the Southeast. You ready for what happens when this hits the press? Elijah asked on the phone. I've never been more ready, Kennedy said. But her hands were shaking. At the same time, across town in a glass-walled office on the 22nd floor of Langford Holdings, panic was spreading like wildfire. Charlotte Langford slammed her phone onto the conference table, her face pale despite the flawless foundation layered over it. "They've got Keller, and now a damn congressional probe?" Mitchell Reese, her lawyer, ran a hand through his thinning hair. "We could file a countersuit. Defamation again, maybe intimidation. Delay the media storm." Charlotte's husband, Trip Langford III, leaned back in his chair. "Or we could fix this the way we've always fixed things. Quietly." Charlotte looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "Find leverage. Keller has a record. DUI back in 2011. I can make a call." Charlotte hesitated. There was a line even she wasn't willing to cross. Until now. "Do it!" But before Tripp could pick up the phone, the building's security team burst in. "You need to see this," one of them said, holding up an iPad. On screen was a video already going viral. Shot by a bystander, it showed Marvin Keller standing beside Kennedy on the steps of the courthouse, handing her a flash drive. "She's not alone anymore," the security chief muttered. The flash drive contained over 400 pages of property audits, emails, and financial logs showing illegal land seizures, fake inspections, and inflated demolition reports. Kennedy and her team had already scanned, backed up, and shared everything with reporters. The walls were closing in. Later that afternoon, Kennedy received a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this." She didn't flinch. Instead, she walked into a crowded community hall on the south side of Charleston. Dozens of residents had gathered, families displaced by the Langfords' developments, elderly couples whose homes were razed under false claims, young activists hungry for action. "I'm not here to speak for you," Kennedy told them, standing on a plastic crate to be seen over the crowd. "I'm here to speak with you. If we want this system to change, it won't be one billionaire or one lawsuit that does it. It's us. Together." Applause burst through the room, thunderous and raw. Someone shouted, "We got your back!" In the far corner, Ashton stood quietly, arms folded. A flicker of something crossed his face. Respect, maybe admiration. He wasn't used to someone matching his power with heart. After the meeting, he walked her to her car. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest," he said. "You sure you don't want to disappear for a few weeks? Let your lawyers handle it." She opened the driver's door and looked him in the eye. "I spent my life making myself small so I wouldn't be a target. Now they're coming for me anyway. I'd rather stand tall." That night, things escalated. Trip Langford didn't just call in favors. He reached out to one of his oldest contacts, Harvey Linwood, a former city commissioner with ties to private security firms. Harvey had his own agenda and wasn't above playing dirty. At 3 a.m., Kennedy's server was hit with a sophisticated cyber attack. Private emails leaked. Old photos twisted out of context. A clip of her getting arrested during a college protest went viral, stripped of explanation. Cable news ran with it, spinning her as radical, reckless, another angry activist pretending to be a victim. Ashton called immediately. "You okay?" "I'm used to this," she said, scrolling through headlines. "They want to make me the story so they can ignore the truth." "Let me issue a statement on your behalf." "No," she said. "I want to face it myself." By morning, she did just that. In a live stream viewed by over 2 million people, Kennedy addressed the smear campaign head-on. "Yes, I was arrested. I was 19. I was marching because a kid in my city was shot by police while walking home from the store. I didn't resist. I didn't run. I just stood in the street and said, 'Enough.' That day changed me. And if that disqualifies me from standing up now, so be it." Her voice didn't waver. "I'm not perfect, but I am not a liar. And I will not be intimidated." The chat blew up. Thousands of comments poured in. Supporters, survivors, whistleblowers, donations, volunteers. Kennedy had officially become a movement, and in a mansion across town, Charlotte Langford stood at her balcony, watching the rain hammer the streets below. Her empire was crumbling. "We underestimated her," Tripp muttered. Charlotte clenched her jaw. "Then it's time we remind everyone who we are." But what they didn't know, what Kennedy had yet to reveal, was that she still had one more card to play, and it was going to change everything. The Langfords were cornered, but they weren't done. That Monday morning, Kennedy arrived at the Charleston courthouse, surrounded by a small but determined group of volunteers. The building loomed like a fortress, grey and cold against the bright southern sun. But Kennedy didn't flinch. She had something far more powerful than nerves or fear: proof. She stepped through the metal detectors, her flash drive secured in her blazer pocket, heart pounding but steady. Elijah had filed a motion for a full evidentiary hearing, and the judge, an older white man named Judge Harmon, long known for siding with developers, had reluctantly agreed. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Charlotte Langford arrived in a designer cream suit, sunglasses still perched on her head like a crown. Tripp followed close behind, checking his watch and whispering to their legal team. They weren't just playing defense, they were plotting something. Kennedy sat calmly with Elijah, scanning the courtroom. She noticed something strange. 2 men in dark suits, not with the court, not with the press, but definitely watching her. She leaned in. "You see them?" "Yep," Elijah said. "Private security, probably Langford's." Kennedy narrowed her eyes. "They're up to something." The judge called the session to order. Kennedy's hands tightened in her lap as Elijah presented the documents, proof of illegal evictions, rigged inspections, falsified permits, and political kickbacks tied to campaign donations. Judge Harmon grunted, unimpressed. "These are serious allegations." "Do you have any witnesses willing to testify under oath?" "We do, Your Honor," Elijah said, motioning to the doors. They opened, and Marvin Keller walked in. The courtroom gasped. Charlotte's mouth opened slightly in disbelief. Kennedy looked over at Tripp. He had gone pale. Keller took the stand. He didn't hesitate. "I was asked to sign off on safety violations. I was offered bonuses to fast-track demolitions that weren't necessary. I went along with it until someone I loved lost her home for no reason. That's when I realized this wasn't just business, it was evil." Judge Harmon didn't respond right away. He tapped his pen, then finally muttered, "Motion to proceed to hearing granted. Court will reconvene Friday." As Kennedy stepped outside, reporters swarmed her. She gave a short, poised statement, then walked toward her car, only to be stopped by one of the suited men. "Ms. Carter," he said calmly, "we'd like a word." Elijah stepped between them. "She's not answering any questions." But the man handed Kennedy a folded piece of paper. "Then read this." They walked off before she could respond. Kennedy opened the paper. It was a cease and desist, signed by a judge in Florida. It claimed she had violated terms from a past legal settlement regarding one of her former housing non-profits, implying misconduct. "That's impossible," she whispered. Elijah scanned it. "This is old." "They're weaponizing your past. We need to get ahead of it." Later that evening, Kennedy sat alone in her apartment. She stared at the envelope, thinking of the non-profit she had poured years into building. It had collapsed during a recession. She had fought to keep it alive, had even sold her car to pay staff, and now they wanted to twist that as proof she was dishonest. Her phone buzzed. "Ashton." "Can you talk?" "Barely," she said. "I saw what they're doing. I've dealt with it. They can't beat you on the truth, so they attack your integrity. they're going to make people doubt me. Only if you let them. You didn't get here because of me, or money, or press. You got here because people believe you. Don't forget that. She didn't reply, just listened. The next morning, Kennedy arrived at a diner for a planned community meeting. But as she parked, she noticed a white SUV across the street, the same one from outside the courthouse. She entered the diner, glanced around. It was mostly empty, just a few locals, a waitress, and a man in a black hoodie sitting alone. She froze. The man looked up, smiled faintly. "Nice place to meet," he said. Kennedy blinked. "Do I know you? Name's Dominic. I used to work for Langford Security." "Then I saw your video." He slid a small folder across the table. "What's this?" "Photos. Documents. Internal memos. Stuff they never thought would see daylight. I kept copies for insurance. Guess I found a better use. Why give it to me? Because they ruined my sister's life. Evicted her while she was in chemo. I was the one who served the papers. I'll never forgive myself." Kennedy opened the folder. The first image showed Charlotte Langford standing beside a city official, envelope in hand. "Dominic," she said softly. This is explosive." "I know." By nightfall, the photos were on every major news site. Charlotte Langford called an emergency press conference. Flanked by her PR team, she stepped up to the podium with forced calm. "These allegations are false and defamatory. We will be pursuing legal action against anyone involved in spreading them." A reporter shouted, "What about the photo showing you bribing Commissioner Lowell?" Charlotte's smile faltered. "No comment." Meanwhile, Kennedy sat with Elijah and Dominic in a cramped hotel room, watching it unfold on TV. "This changes everything," Elijah said. "No," Kennedy whispered. "It just begins the real war." And from across the city, Charlotte Langford stared out her penthouse window, her nails digging into her palms. She had just realized something terrifying. Kennedy Carter wasn't going away. She was coming for everything. The morning news hit harder than anyone expected. CNN led with, "Langford Empire under fire. Bribery photos leak." Charlotte Langford's carefully crafted world began to unravel live on every screen across America. Her press team scrambled to spin the damage, but it was too late. The image of her handing an envelope to Commissioner Lowell had already become an overnight meme. Hashtags like #Langford, bribes and Kennedy the truth teller were trending nationwide. But the war was far from over. Kennedy Carter wasn't celebrating. She was on the phone with Dominic, cross-checking the documents he gave her with city records. Elijah was digging deeper into old zoning cases, and for the first time in months, residents who had once stayed silent started calling to speak up. Until something strange happened. The website hosting the leaked documents went down. Emails bounced back. Kennedy's own phone started glitching. Then, late that night, a black SUV rolled by her apartment and stopped for 10 seconds. No one got out. No one rolled the window down. It just waited, then drove off. Kennedy watched from behind the curtain, pulse pounding. Elijah arrived 10 minutes later. "We're being watched. You need to stay somewhere else for a while." "You think they're trying to scare me?" "They are. And it's working. I want you safe." Kennedy hesitated, then nodded. "Fine." "But we don't stop." He handed her a flash drive. "There's more. Dominic helped us get into the city's old secure servers." "This one. It's different." They sat together, the glow of Elijah's laptop lighting their faces in the dim hotel room. He clicked play on a folder labeled Project Willow. It was a video. A drone flyover of a quiet, tree-filled neighborhood, overlaid with red X's and a flashing timer. Then came a voice, Trip Langford's. "They'll clear out the last of them by Q4. The sooner we break ground, the sooner we can announce Langford Commons. No delays. Use every trick we've used before." A second voice chimed in, laughing. "Even if it means relocating a few more grandmas." Trip responded, "That's what moving trucks are for." Kennedy's hands trembled. "He's not just demolishing buildings. He's treating people like furniture." Elijah's jaw clenched. "We go public tomorrow." But as they were preparing the press release, Dominic called, "You two need to get out of there now." "Why?" "They know where you are. I just intercepted a message. Someone paid a PI to track your location. You've got maybe 20 minutes. Kennedy grabbed her bag. Elijah shut the laptop and pulled her to the door. They exited the back stairwell, slipped into a rented car, and drove through the night. When they reached a safe Airbnb on the edge of Columbia, they were exhausted. But they weren't broken. The next day, Kennedy held a press briefing on the steps of City Hall. The media swarmed her, microphones shoved into her face. Cameras flashing. "This isn't about one woman versus a wealthy family," she began. "This is about justice. About how communities are stolen in silence while the world is told to look the other way. Well, I'm done looking away." She held up a copy of Project Willow's plans. "This is proof. And I won't be silenced." As the footage aired live, something remarkable happened. People began flooding City Hall, not just locals, but organizers from Atlanta, DC, and Charlotte. Protest signs. Chants, a wall of voices demanding accountability, but Charlotte Langford wasn't done either. She appeared that evening in a sleek, carefully lit TV interview. "The accusations are ridiculous," she said. "The so-called evidence was stolen, manipulated, and lacks any legal foundation. Miss Carter is not a whistleblower. She's a failed businesswoman with a personal grudge." But for the first time, her eyes betrayed her. The cracks in her polished armor showed. The next morning, the twist hit. Dominic was gone, vanished. His phone disconnected, his apartment emptied. No sign of struggle, just absence. Kennedy paced the floor of the safe house. "They took him." Elijah didn't speak. "Or paid him off." "No." "He wouldn't take money." "Then where is he?" Suddenly, Kennedy's phone pinged. A single message from an unknown number. "Meet me alone." 5 p.m. The old train yard. She showed it to Elijah. He shook his head. "It's a trap." "Maybe. But what if it's Dominic?" "Then we go together." "No," Kennedy said quietly. "I go alone." "If it is him, he might not trust anyone else." Elijah stared at her. "This could be how they get you. Or it could be how we end this." 5 o'clock. She stood at the rusted gates of the abandoned train yard, the wind catching her coat. The place was silent except for the distant sound of traffic. Then came the voice. "Over here!" Dominic stepped out from behind a rail car. "You're alive," Kennedy whispered. He nodded. "They came to me. Offered money, threatened my niece." Kennedy's face tightened. "Did you take it?" "No." "But I did take this." He handed her another flash drive. "It's the original Project Willow audio. No edits. No tampering. And something else. Tripp admitting to paying off Judge Harmon." Kennedy's breath caught. This is what we've been waiting for." "It's time," Dominic said. "Burn them to the ground." That night, Kennedy released the full unedited video online. It spread like wildfire. Within hours, the DA opened a formal criminal investigation. Judge Harmon recused himself. Charlotte Langford's face disappeared from the front page, replaced by Kennedy Carter's. Not as an activist, not as a protester, but as the woman who took on a dynasty. And won. The courthouse was a pressure cooker. Outside, a crowd had formed, holding up signs that read, "We stand with Kennedy," and "Langford lies must fall." TV crews jostled for angles, while murmurs spread through social media like wildfire. Inside, the tension was worse. Kennedy Carter sat at the plaintiff's table, composed but emotionally exhausted, her hands clasped tightly on the desk in front of her. To her left sat Elijah, his presence calm and unshakable. Across the aisle was Charlotte Langford, impeccably dressed in a cream power suit, her expression unreadable, as if daring the room to challenge her entitlement. Flanking her was Trip Langford, his eyes narrowed, jaw tight. The judge entered. Not Harmon. He'd been forced to recuse himself after Dominic's leak. Instead, Judge Claire Monahan presided. A black woman in her early 60s, with a sharp intellect and a reputation for no-nonsense justice. She surveyed the courtroom as if she could already smell the lies. "We are here to hear Carter v. Langford Holdings. Both parties may proceed." Kennedy stood, her voice firm. "Your Honor, today's case is not simply about fraud or illegal land acquisition. It's about the systemic abuse of power, the silencing of voices, and the erasure of entire communities." Charlotte's lawyer, a smug man named Richard Dobbins, interrupted. "Objection, Your Honor. We're not here to debate morality. Let's stick to the facts." Judge Monahan's gavel struck lightly. "Overruled. Miss Carter, proceed." Kennedy continued, pulling up a slide on the courtroom projector. "This is the neighborhood of Willow Creek." Or what's left of it. Over the last 5 years, Langford Holdings bought out homes under false pretenses. But here's where it gets worse. Residents weren't just pressured. They were coerced. Gasps filled the courtroom when a photo appeared, Tripp shaking hands with Commissioner Lowell, time-stamped 2 weeks before zoning changes were passed. Elijah stood to distribute hard copies of the original zoning documents, and the redacted ones sent to the public. "The discrepancy is clear," he said. What the community saw was edited. What the Langfords submitted privately was entirely different. Then Kennedy played the bombshell, the full unedited audio file Dominic had retrieved. Tripp's voice filled the room. "Make it look legal. Move the poor folks out. Use emergency inspection if you have to." "My mother doesn't want those eyesores near Langford Commons." And then, chillingly, "They won't fight back. They never do." You could have heard a pin drop. Judge Monahan leaned forward. "This is verified," Kennedy nodded. "Cross-referenced with city server logs and metadata. Original time-stamped file." Charlotte finally spoke. "This is absurd. That clip was stolen, and Dominic Lewis has a history of substance abuse. You're trusting a known felon over a respected family?" That's when the twist hit. The courtroom doors opened. Dominic entered, clean-shaven, suit pressed, and walking with quiet resolve. "I'm here to testify." Charlotte's face went pale. Judge Monahan raised an eyebrow. "You're under oath, Mr. Lewis." Dominic nodded. "Gladly." For the next hour, he unraveled the Langford empire from the inside, detailing everything from the forged permits to secret offshore accounts used to bribe local officials. He laid out names, dates, and bank transfers, including a critical one, a wire of $150,000 to Judge Harmon's sister's foundation. Then he handed over a sealed envelope. Inside, a notarized confession from Harmon himself, admitting he took the bribe to stall legal action against the Langfords. Charlotte broke. "She said we were above this," Tripp muttered under his breath, "that they'd never believe a woman like her over us." Kennedy heard it, and so did Judge Monaghan. "Repeat that, Mr. Langford." Tripp looked up, as if suddenly aware of the gravity around him. "She said the court would always choose us. That a black woman standing alone wouldn't change a thing." Kennedy stood taller. "She was wrong." Judge Monaghan delivered her ruling. "Based on the testimony, evidence, and pattern of abuse presented, I hereby order an immediate injunction on all Langford Holdings construction projects, a federal investigation into their financial practices, and the restoration of all properties acquired under duress. Furthermore, I refer this matter to the State Attorney General's Office for criminal prosecution." The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in quiet vindication. Tears welled up in Kennedy's eyes. Elijah squeezed her hand. Dominic gave her a nod that said, "We did it." Outside, as she stepped onto the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed her again. But this time, she didn't flinch. "What do you have to say to the community, Miss Carter?" one called out. Kennedy took a breath. "To every person who's ever been told they don't matter, that their story isn't valid, that money will always win, I'm here to say that's a lie. Justice doesn't come easy, but it does come." The crowd roared. In the background, Charlotte was escorted into a black sedan, avoiding eye contact with the people she once looked down on. A young girl from Willow Creek handed Kennedy a small bouquet of daisies. "For you," she said. "My grandma said you saved our home." Kennedy knelt, tears spilling freely now. "No, sweetheart. We did it together." And in that moment, the real victory wasn't just legal. It was personal, human, transformational. The sun was beginning to set over Atlanta, casting a golden hue over the newly restored neighborhood of Willow Creek. What had once been a community swallowed by corporate greed was now alive again. Children playing in freshly mowed yards, small businesses reopening with hand-painted "Welcome Back" signs, and laughter spilling out from porches like music. Kennedy stood quietly on the steps of the old Carter family home. The same porch where her grandmother once sat every evening, humming church hymns and reminding her to never let anyone define her worth. Today, that porch belonged to her again. She took a slow breath, letting the smell of magnolia trees and fresh-cut grass fill her chest. Elijah walked up beside her, handing her a glass of iced tea. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" he said. Kennedy smiled. "It feels like home." The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. After the court ruling, the Langford empire began to unravel quickly. Tripp and Charlotte were indicted on multiple counts of fraud, racketeering, and bribery. Judge Harmon was disbarred and placed under federal investigation. City officials who took hush money were exposed by Dominic, who, for the first time in years, finally walked with his head held high. But what mattered most wasn't just the justice served. It was what came after. Kennedy had declined interviews from every major news network. She wasn't interested in becoming a media sensation. Instead, she worked with local leaders to start the Willow Initiative, a community-led fund that helped former residents return, rebuild, and reclaim their roots. "Miss Carter," a young boy called from the sidewalk, holding a soccer ball. "Can you come ref again?" "Jamal won't stop cheating." She laughed, stepping down from the porch. "I'll be right there, but if I catch you faking fouls again, you're benched." The kids cracked up as she jogged over. From across the street, an older man in a Vietnam veteran hat watched with pride. It was Mr. Holloway, the neighborhood's oldest resident. When Kennedy had shown him the deed proving his house would be returned to him, he'd wept into her arms. "That girl's got fire," he'd said. "Real fire." Later that evening, a modest block party lit up the street. A local jazz band played on the sidewalk. Neighbors shared grilled ribs, peach cobbler, and stories that stretched across generations. Kennedy stood at the heart of it all, humbled. She raised a glass. To every voice that refused to be silenced, to every home that refused to be erased, and to every person who knows that dignity is not for sale, this victory is yours. The crowd erupted in cheers, clinking plastic cups and hugging like long-lost family. Then, as the music kicked back in and the stars began to peek through the night sky, someone tapped Kennedy on the shoulder. It was a young journalist, early 20s, camera hanging from her neck. "I know you've said no to interviews, but can I just ask one thing? What kept you going through all of it? Through the mud, the threats, the courtrooms?" Kennedy looked up at the sky for a second, then back at her. "Because I've lived what it's like to be ignored. To be told your pain isn't real unless someone richer, whiter, or louder confirms it. I wasn't about to let another little black girl grow up thinking her voice doesn't matter." The reporter nodded, eyes wet. As the night wound down and families returned home, Kennedy walked back to her porch and sat in the same spot her grandmother once did. Elijah joined her, and together they watched the neighborhood glow with life again. "This is just the beginning," he said. Kennedy nodded. "And next time they come for our people, we'll already be standing." This story is more than fiction. It's a reminder that justice isn't passive. It's built brick by brick, voice by voice, truth by truth. If Kennedy Carter's journey moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know or of something worth fighting for, then don't let it stop here. Subscribe to our channel. Share this story. Help us amplify voices that are too often overlooked. Because sometimes one story can change everything.